itself while blocking off and keeping students safe. So I would say student safety isn't really the concern when we're comparing sites, because that is a given across all of our sites. There might be a little more planning that goes into the logistics and of the phasing to make sure that everything works well and goes smoothly during construction. I think that, and I just want to be clear that we can also put together kind of we can put together this in pros and cons about looking at these sites and the advantages and disadvantages if that is helpful. But I don't think that there is that trade-off with student safety one way or the other. Libby?
I just want to mention, I don't think the cost savings of not doing extra surveys is really much compared to the cost of the project. But one thing I would love in theory to study other sites. I just think it helps us justify what we do in the end if we've done our due diligence. But if it ends up there really is feasibility to do it, and like Blake said, it's not worth the time, I think, for them to take the study. And also I think the issue with doing something like we built on Playstead is you need to replicate those amenities somewhere else, like in theory here, which I assume the MSBA wouldn't reimburse us for. So like we would have to build soccer fields and playgrounds and baseball fields here in a site that would be left, total mess. So that's, to me, that's why I see the advantage of trying to keep it all on one site, especially if Playstead is not the perfect site otherwise, right? Like, it's not going to fit
in Medford Square. When we made this like sort of decision to put it into the conversation, and RFP hadn't yet been released for the city-owned parcel, it now has. Project's been awarded. There's a whole like revitalization plan happening that is like, that train is moving down the track faster than our study is able to move. So that is another consideration. So I think Medford Square is like not an option anymore for that reason. Luke?
And just to be fair, I'm not hearing from left field that they're advocating for one site or another. That comes from us. I just wanted to make sure, I guess, state that, because that's the way I'm hearing it, right? Like, we'll tell you where we think where we would like things surveyed. And
yes, that's absolutely correct. And I will say, I think what led, especially for Columbus Park, this site that we're on right now is almost 30 acres. Columbus Square or Columbus Park was 5 acres for put in perspective.
And do we have the city's survey? Because I remember the survey, and I remember Alicia kind of stepping through and explaining pros and cons. Certainly elevations are different throughout the city, and she studied it, or the city, her department studied it. There is a presentation. Is that something that I guess would go in a repository, library for our organization for our reference?
We could certainly do that. The meeting was recorded that we had at that time, and it is available on the YouTube channel as well. So if people want to go back and watch that meeting, they certainly can. I'm going to take a couple of questions from Zoom. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair Graham. First of all, sorry I'm not there in person again. I just came from CHA's grand opening over at Cabot, and by the time I get there, I might just go home while I'm in the car. Anyway, I think I lean towards the one site, although I understand Libby's comments, just comparison for long run discussion. My question, I guess, to left field is, if we do only choose the one site, does that allow us more opportunity to explore different options on the Medford High School complex, such as building on maybe the Field of Dreams and trying to fit in as many fields as we can for our students and athletes, as well as doing it by piecemeal?
Yes, I would say that by taking the other options off the table, especially if they don't seem as viable, we are able to take more time to study more options on this site. The MSBA requires us to at least study a code upgrade only, renovation. We'll have renovation addition options, and we'll have a full new construction, so that there will be a number of options on this site that will be studied, so that it's not just us putting, not just the project team saying this is your one solution on this site. That is the process that MSBA takes you through. to make sure that you have looked at all of the options.
Aaron?
Great, thank you.
Is there a way, because I know that we had a conversation with some people at City Hall, like with Alicia Hunt, who works in our office of strategic planning, sustainability. She, like, an idea that someone ran across my mind was that if we were to move, let's say, the Andrews Middle School, which is the other side of town, and put the high school there, for example, in that larger space, so that you had K through 12 all in one location, for example. And she kind of communicates us like the various problems that can come up with that, not only because of the size issue, that you mentioned, obviously the acreage, but also because it's not necessarily the ground itself is not necessarily viable for that size building, so only able to handle that much weight, I guess. I don't know the science, of course. And so is there a way that we could, at the very least, I think, like Libby mentioned, that we do what I would like, for lack of a better term, like a soft kind of research into various areas, so that we can, of course, like cover our due diligence, but not necessarily commit as much resources to every single site location, because if we know that some sizing, like acreage wise, is just not going to be viable within the first couple of hours of like doing basic research, we understand that it won't work. We can still say to the community, we understand that we've tried other locations. Very quickly, we realized this wasn't going to work. We're still led to where we thought we were going to be in the first place. We wanted to say that we've done this just as a soft understanding. Is that something we can do? I don't know if that seems a little bit more drastic, but to kind of cover both things, I do agree. I think ultimately, if we know that this is size-wise the best place to do it, as well as we already have some of the more needed like locational spaces, the pool's a bigger question mark, obviously. I think that there is value just for maintaining one space, but also saying to the community that we try our best to cover other bases as well.
Is that something that the left field team may be able to help us with, like from a like sort of rough ball kind of assessment to say like really, if we look at these sites and we can point you to the direction of that meeting that was recorded and some of those sites, and certainly I'm sure Director Hunt would be happy to chat with you, but even just some sort of a chart of like, here's all the sites that are like even possible in Medford, and here's what they look like. And, from your perspective, are they viable, yes or no? So that when we rule them out, like we're doing that with like a record of like a recommendation of some kind. Is that helpful? And by the spoiler, we're gonna have a little bit of free time here, so we might be able to do that without really changing the trajectory of the rest of the project.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would love to do that, and I think that would be a really good thing to do, to your point of proving to the community that these are options that we looked at, but we'll have actual reasons to back up why they don't work. And it'll be clear, it'll be in a document that you provided and
Right.
pointed to, especially when you guys do come to a consensus on a single option. A lot of people at that point will ask, well, what about this one? And what about this one? And we'll have the process laid out.
Yeah, and I do think that the MSBA will still look for that as well, just to, this is why we landed on this site. You can look,
Right.
here, this is why we didn't pursue them any further.
Sorry to jump in, but I think one of the key points in order to determine what a high school site is if you make the determination, if the city is willing to have the school and the fields as two separate entities, then that opens up a lot of options, right? But if there's very little appetite for the city to bus kids for the fields, then that immediately takes us from this many options and these sizes down to this, right? We're gonna be within a typical acreage of say 10 to 12, right? If you don't want to shift the students off for the fields, I think those two pieces, by the time you add together the fields and a building, and it could just be one or two fields, but it narrows that down significantly.
Emily?
I love the idea of laying something out for the public. On city council, we've had a lot of conversations around zoning, where when we move to the next phase of zoning and it starts to affect a new neighborhood, a lot of people will say, this is going too fast. Why did this just start? But this is out of nowhere. You just came out with this all of a sudden. And it's then we have to say, well, we've actually been doing this for quite some time. It just hasn't started to affect you until now. But we can then go back and say, here's the website where, so I think that's a great call, with like maybe one version that's highly detailed and one version that's very visual and simple. Maybe with like click-throughs. I don't have to tell you guys. But the second thing I wanted to ask about is, I understand that the pool, will not be part of the MSBA project at all. Could you speak, or I don't know, could you speak to that a little bit more? I think I don't have full clarity on it. I think that's maybe another point about this site and a different site that would be worth understanding for all of us. That if we were to use a different site, how would that affect the pool or not?
Absolutely. So the MSBA, there are certain spaces, and certain guidelines of, space allotment in spaces that the MSBA deems eligible costs, which means they will participate in funding spaces. Pools, they will not participate in funding. An option, if you do stay on this site, is to renovate the pool area and separate that for a portion of the building and, create maybe a mostly new building with that as a renovated portion, so that the cost of keeping the pool isn't as significant as building a new pool. You do have the option to build a new pool. It would completely be on the city of Bedford's dime. And that's something that you'd have to work through, especially with the community, to make sure they understand.
You can renovate with, as part of the,
Durfee did that.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure many did, but Durfee's done it, yeah.
I just,
You have to pay for it.
oh, but you can,
We can do it if we want.
I understand. Okay.
100% Scott.
Got it.
Yeah, if the building stays here and the desire is to keep the pool, yeah, I think we'd look at the most cost effective way, because we know any money that we put into the pool is gonna be 100% non-reimbursable, so we would wanna be smart about that. And we've seen schools, I know out of our high school used to have a pool, and I think they got rid of it because when they just redid their school, MSBA wouldn't contribute, and they just weren't getting, kind of the return on investment, so to say, from it. So we have seen pools go away because of how the MSBA handles it.
Dr. Cushing, did you have a question? I thought I saw Dr. Cushing's hand up. I just didn't want to lose track.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Did you have a question?
No, more just having worked on.
We lost you. Oh, we literally lose him? Okay.
Now that he's speaking.
He'll be back. Luke?
So in one of the forms that we filled out, I don't recall if it was the educational profile or one of the others. We described how pool actually serves an important part of our curriculum that is deeply felt by the community. So we need to continue having pool sort of honoring that part of the curriculum. I wanted to ask about our gymnasium, which strikes me as very large, but I'm no expert. If we didn't stay at this site, could we recreate a gymnasium that large and be reimbursed? Is that something?
A lot of times the MSBA will work with you on certain square footages, like if it's what you have now and it's, maxed out and you can't go smaller, they may work with you if you're like, yeah, we want it double the size of that, like. So
Our gym is very big.
It is
It's
quite
a football
big.
field.
It is not a typical size.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm not
It's a
exactly.
field house, almost.
They allow up to 12,000 square feet, I think, for a high school for gym, so, but that would be a conversation, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but we're gonna be working on the educational plan for the school and laying out spaces that are required, programs that use those spaces, and usage rates is all going to kind of factor into having that discussion with the MSBA. Another option, like the pool, if it's in good shape to keep, it might be worth renovating instead of building new in that case. We'll take a look at that.
Nicole? As someone who didn't go to this high school, are the pool locker rooms separate from the field house locker rooms, or are they shared? Okay, so if in theory, because I'm thinking for my knowledge of Durfee, if you were to renovate the pool, you could then make a multi-use locker room, so you're not then paying for renovating the pool and paying for a new pool locker room, in theory, is that something that could happen?
Yeah, in theory, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really depends on, the layout of the building and
Yeah.
the design, how it all fits, but
Yeah.
yeah, in theory,
Okay.
that's definitely possible.
So, I mean, on the one hand, I definitely think we need to have something that we can tell the public. We considered this and this and this. I just feel uncomfortable with spending any money to do that, because if you tell me we have a 30-acre site, and you spend money to study a 5-acre site, I'm gonna be like, spend money, what? It's kind of like, you have 12 kids and you're gonna study, whether you can afford to live in whether a 1-bedroom is the right choice for you. It would be kind of wild. If they were close, I would be like, let's spend the money, but 5 acres is the larger of those sites. And I don't want us to say, oh, we only spent $100,000 determining that 5-acre site is in fact too small for something when we're already on a 30-acre site. I mean, we should be able to say that that's the case, but I don't think we should spend money to do that.
So I guess I think that's a good question for us to understand, like, if we were to ask you all to help us build that chart, whatever it is, chart, 1-pager, like I've talked about a lot of 1-pagers today, so I'll just call it that for lack of a better term. But if we were to do that, is that in the scope of your current services as our OPM? Yes, okay. Maria?
One thing that I have heard about this location over the years, not just, because of this project, is that we're in the least populated area of the city, and the more dense populations in other areas want to be closer to their school. We're at the opposite, complete opposite end on the Winchester line. It has, some people would like to see it somewhere else, and they might even suffer the size of the property to have it closer.
Well, this park is just as,
Oh, I know,
it's even more on the edge.
yes.
We did have that
But it's
conversation.
densely there.
But we did have that conversation, so I think that would be a great meeting to go rewatch. Director Hunt was really insightful about that while Columbus Park is not unlike this site, it could move the school to an economically disadvantaged area and provide increased access to people who lack that access to our high school today on foot, right? So there's value to looking at that site from that perspective. But it is 1/6 the size of this site. We would be making real trade-offs, pool, playing fields. We probably have like a 5-story high school. There would be no parking, all the things, right? So I think it is a good. We actually did have a detailed conversation about like, where are those places? That's why we talked about like the Andrews McGlynn complex. Because that could serve that purpose, but the complexities of that, and frankly, the cost of doing a swap is like exponentially like outside of what MSBA is going to entertain for reimbursement. So that made it sort of not on the list. But to your point, like, we know what those sites are that the community talks about. So I don't think it would be that hard for them to put together something that just provides those talking points. So when people say, but did you ever consider, like, yes, we did. And we did that in multiple steps. We did that as a group a year ago. We did it when we signed off unanimously on our education profile. We're going to do it again here. But what we're not going to do is a design study that spends money putting a building together on a property that is not viable, right? So I feel like this is part of why we have an OPM. We could use their services to do that. That might make some sense. Lisa?
I have a question, just a clarification. So with the Columbus site, you mentioned that the possibility of having fields at a different location. Was that site chosen partly because like the Tufts Park next to the Curtis Tufts was like considered for fields? Or is that not, was that not part of?
Medford does not have lots of free space.
Yeah.
So there were very few options essentially that would, like, there's very few pieces of sort of big swaths of property that Medford has. So there's just only a handful of choices. And so that's sort of how it was identified.
Mhm.
And sort of similarly, Medford Square being fairly undeveloped right now is how it got identified. And certainly there's huge value from a planner's perspective. And Alicia talks a lot about this meeting, like, there's huge value from a planner's perspective to putting a high school like near the middle of the city, right? Like, there's just tons of economic advantage to that. However, there's a lot of economic advantage to the current proposal that is like moving forward too. So again, like the timing of saying, that's part of why we put Medford Square on the list, because it is the middle, right? Like for all intents and purposes of the city. It would increase access to lots of people, but you would be trading for playing fields off property and all those other things. The city has moved forward in sort of a different direction since then, which is just sort of what happens when there's, you know, these press are a bit longer, right? So. Paul,
I wasn't, I just want to be clear, I was not in that meeting. But did we consider any taking cities, like
we did
spots?
not.
I mean, I know that the additional cost takings, I don't know, does MSBA help cover those? No, we're on our own. All right, well, everything costs so much today, so,
That had to be length of, well, just,
of course, yeah, that's good.
Brian?
Just wanted to say, I think any viable design firm that's looking at these feasibility studies is doing the same thing. They're out there looking at sites, and if they have any brilliant ideas.
They're listening to our meeting right now.
You know, they know what we know, and they can come to the same conclusions. Or bring something to the table, like say, have you thought about? And you can say, yes, we have, and here's our list of why it doesn't.
So to piggyback on that, like, it would be easier for everyone if this was, we were building on a new site. Probably cheaper too, like, well, that, I don't know about that, but I think everyone would love to do it if there was some great place to just build new, leave this place undisturbed for 3 years of construction, but it's just, if we can't find it, we can't force it, so it's like we're not making it any easier on ourselves by staying here, so it's not like the easy way out or anything like that. Yeah, it's important to make people know that we're not making it easier.
We're not making it easy, and we're not spending a lot of more money.
Right, and we're not also making it harder than it needs to be, like, it's just kind of the reality of it.
Yeah, that's our talking points.
And I do apologize if this was already discussed, but, and I was not at that meeting. But Columbus Park, was there a discussion about what would happen to the Mississippi?
No, it was a very cursory discussion of like, what even are the places that are big enough for us to entertain?
Cause I
Right.
think it's important to know, if you don't know the Mississippi, that there are stairs in the playground of the Mississippi that lead to Columbus Park. So,
If you were taking that away, you would be taking away space from the Mississippi.
well, you would be taking the field, that adjacent field that the school does use regularly, but I think just also having a high school right there,
Attached.
unless,
Yeah,
It would be literally spitting distance.
if we're keeping the Mississippi where it is,
Not defining them either.
and I don't know then where you would put parking.
Right.
Cause it is in the middle of a neighborhood.
yeah. Luke?
What I don't recall being discussed in the past, but something that, jumps out at me every time I think about this project is, when this school was sized initially in the late sixties, it was constructed for a school population of, I think, 3,600 newspaper clippings. And at one point, they actually had 4,400 kids, at its peak, I think in the early eighties. About 40, maybe it was 4,000. At any rate, very large numbers. Today, we don't have even half that population. So we have twice the space we need for the number of kids.
Well, I think that is a simplistic view of space.
Sure.
Because education has changed dramatically since the 70s. And our vocational spaces have inordinately different space requirements than classrooms do. So I can't wait actually to find out how big the high school should be, because I think there's a lot of opinions about how the building's gonna be half the size. And I think there will be facts about that soon enough.
Sure, but just to finish my point. So the thing that I haven't heard discussed is in a pinch, during a construction period, would it be feasible to move all the kids to one half, knock down the old half, build, and then when that's complete, repopulate the new building and potentially renovate or knock down the other half, right? There's advantages, I think, to size that I haven't heard discussed yet, but I wanted to bring up in case others have thought about it or have feedback.
Yeah, I would say that is definitely going to be something that is considered, especially when the architect is brought on, because they will be able to analyze what spaces you have right now, how that applies against MSBA's guidelines, and see how much space you need, and then obviously discussions with the school on what spaces would need to stay in a phased construction situation like that. In theory, very possible to move kids around a building and either renovate or tear a portion down and build. That's all going to be something that we discuss during the logistics and phasing discussions. Definitely later in the project, but we'll have a better idea once the architect comes on about what your space looks like versus what you should have. Great.
One last question. Sorry.
Okay.
The alumni field,
I promised we wouldn't take till 8:30, so.
alumni field, is that all not anchored? Seems like a pretty big space.
No,
The one that's, that one, I don't know where to describe it. Oh, that's just Tufts property, sorry. You can take the Tufts one. Take taxes, we should take it. Okay, sorry.
So I think I'm hearing that we might want to make a motion to request that OPM do a simple analysis of available properties. Yeah? Is there somebody who wants to make that motion? Luke?
I make a motion that left field perform a peer review of prior surveys.
Great. And is there a second? Second by Libby. Okay. Well, I'll call the roll. Jenny Graham, yeah. Mayor Longo Kern.
Yes.
Dr. Galusi. Yes. Dr. Cushing.
Yes.
Marta Cabral.
Yeah.
Libby Brown.
Yes.
Marissa Jessen.
Yes.
Maria Dorsey. Yes. Brian Hilliard.
Yes.
Tracy Keene. Yes. Emily Lazaro.
No.
Said no.
Is that,
No.
this is about to continue looking at other spaces?
To have left field do a cursory look at the other spaces available and create a chart for us.
Create the chart about the spaces that we looked at and why we decided, then I mean, yeah. Okay. Sorry, Aaron summarized, but he did it wrong.
Sorry. Continue like looking at them like a saw, like.
Alright, sorry, it's still that, okay.
I'm wrong.
I think to clarify, my intent is that we can do this quickly-ish. And we can still take things off the table officially before it becomes something we're gonna spend money on in the design study, in the feasibility study. So yes to both.
I was wrong. We're gonna do this.
Okay. Yeah. Nicole Morel.
Yes.
Aaron Lapane.
Yeah.
And Joe Bowen. 15 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Yes. Will?
Read what that motion was.
Sure. It was, Luke, it was a motion to do a peer review of available spaces in Bedford.
There is to perform a peer review of the city's prior study of available spaces.
Here you go. Cool. Okay, moving on. So, the left field team has an update for us about the designer selection panel and the next steps. So, we did, officially get the green light to bring left field on board. We've signed the contract. All that was done in record time. Thanks to the mayor's office. And, we're like eager and ready to go. And we have some updates about what's next. So I'm gonna turn it over to the left field team.
Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, all right, so this was the same schedule that we showed at our last meeting. Over on the left, far left, the designer selection are the only dates that have been updated. We had been hopeful that we would be able to push out the design RFS very quickly after being brought on board officially. After the MSBA OPM panel and talking with the MSBA, they were not fond of that idea, and just based on how many projects that they currently have, they're backed up essentially. They're just having a hard time kind of keeping up with getting all of the projects through the process. So they did unfortunately push us out to the August, I'm sorry,
September.
yeah, September 23rd and October, and October 7th. So we were hoping to get on the August designer selection panel meetings.
July.
We knew July was gonna be tough to meet, but we definitely could get on August. It's certainly something that we're capable of doing and have the time to do it, but we are kind of at the MSBA's mercy when it comes to their schedule. So
So their designer selection panels until the end of September were completely full.
Yeah.
We could tell them that if anything changes, to let us know. We'll be ready to like move at a moment's notice, but they do not foresee that happening.
Yeah, so the dates that you see there are what they sent us. They were very specific in their email that these dates cannot change. So they have heard us pushing, and it just wasn't as successful as we were hoping. That being said, that gives us quite a bit of time between now and getting a designer on board, so we want to be really proactive in what we're doing. I think this site discussion was perfect because that's definitely something that we're able to do and take on and get ahead of something that the designer would typically do. But given the kind of the case that we have here, I think it should be pretty simple and good for us to kind of get a head start on that. We also want to really dive into the educational program, and I'll let Jen talk on this a little bit. But that's something as well that we want to start working with the school on, get their educational program, start to look at it, start to put it into some of the MSBA's space summaries that will tell us, school size, and just start doing some of that legwork so that when we do get the designer on board, they kind of already have a really good starting point and don't have to kind of go back and do some of this stuff. So we're trying to maintain as much of the schedule as we can. All the other dates and the feasibility schematic and funding the project have not changed. We are confident that we can still hit the January 2026 submission of the PDP, which is the preliminary design program. That's the first big MSBA submission. So we had been planning, or originally scheduled to submit that in January, and we still feel confident that we can hit that. It's just going to be a little bit more legwork for the OPM to kind of do some of the preliminary stuff, and hopefully get a designer on board that's willing to really work with us on kind of these expedited submissions. Do you want to just touch on the ed plan quick? Kind of.
Absolutely. So as Matt summarized, great summary, we are looking to move full speed ahead with that educational program. So that to bring everybody up to speed, what that is, the educational program is really it's what the design of your building is based on. So it is a layout of what programs you have now, or once the schools are officially combined their schedules next year. It'll lay out that program, and then also the future hopes and goals for the school. And that is what the designer will take, and they'll tell you how many spaces you need to achieve those goals, and keep those programs or expand programs, add programs. So we're going to start working with Dr. Glucy and your team, and try to get a good draft of that going by the time we have the designer on. I would say 95% of it should be complete by then. We've sent over some this today. I sent over some. Yes, it's a very long email.
Can't wait, Jen.
Some examples from other schools, from similar schools, from other MSBA projects of ours that have received praise. So things to look out for, things to consider when we're putting together, when the district's putting together the ed plan for the project. The first draft of that is due with that first January submission, the PDP, the preliminary design program. that point, the school committee will have signed off, and then this group will sign off as it is part of the PVP package that goes to the MSBA. And then that's again just a draft. So at that point, you'll still have the whole next phase, the preferred schematic report phase, as you're narrowing down to a single preferred solution for the building. You'll have time to edit that ed plan based on feedback we've heard from the MSBA at that point, based on things that the OPM, the design team, everybody is taking a look at it. And so there will be time to edit it up until next June, I believe. So, but we're starting the process now. I think we can make some really good headway on it between now and bringing the design team on. Handing that to them will save a ton of time. And I think that's we're gonna hit the ground running.
Yeah.
We want to keep things moving.
Any questions on either designer selection or the first phase that we're, heading into? All right. You have a few slides on designer selection. I believe we've kind of eliminated the July building committee meeting right now just because of the time that we have, but we'll meet in August and we'll go through a much more detailed kind of how to go about the proposals. But we did want to give just a quick overview of kind of the major steps that we'll be taking.
And just for all of you to know, Matt has proposed a meeting schedule for us for the next year so that we can have a standing schedule. And I will pass this off to Lisa to ask her to schedule calendar holds for you all. In general, we try to stick to Monday night as best we could, but like every holiday is on Monday, and we have school committee two meetings a month. So on those weeks where we had to have a meeting, or those months where we had to have a meeting and there wasn't a Monday, it's generally like a Wednesday. So that's roughly what we're going to try to hold to, but I will ask Lisa to send this full list out to you all, as well as a list of list of calendar holds.
Yeah, so just quickly on the designer selection overview, important concepts is, we've already submitted the designer RFS to the MSBA, so they're already reviewing it. And we have, all of the major aspects of this project described in it, very similar to the OPM RFS that you had issued previously. We'll be advertising at the end of July is what the MSBA is anticipating. We can advertise earlier. I just don't think it's going to necessarily bias anything in the MSBA world. So if we get the review of the RFS back from the MSBA and we want to advertise for 6 weeks instead of 4, that's fine. That just gives the designers more time to kind of look at it. But we can talk about that when we get there. So once we advertise, interested designers will submit their proposals, both kind of their master file brochure and their application. After we receive all of those, we'll submit that to their review, and then this committee or a smaller subcommittee will also start to review the submissions, and we'll start to look at which designer is kind of the most beneficial for the project. It's important to remember that the designer RFS and the designer review is all qualification based. It is not based on dollars and cents. So we'll look at it strictly from a qualification standpoint. It's not until after you select a designer that you go into the negotiation, similar to what we did with the OPM. So just keep that in mind as you start to review the proposals. It's all based on qualifications. The designer selection panel meetings, like we said, are end of September, first week of August. The first meeting of the DSP is to review the proposals. The MSBA will typically ask, who your top 3 or 4 firms are, and then those 3 firms will be interviewed at the following meeting at the first week of October. And then at that meeting, you'll rank your designers from 1 through 3, 4, however many you have. And if the designer selection panel all agrees, you'll go into negotiations with your top rated firm and hopefully reach an agreement with them.
A quick question on that.
Yep.
You know, we were selecting an OPM rating really kind of. It was unanimous, but it wasn't like you were like 3 times the points as the next person. Is that the same kind of like, is the number 1 usually just a little ahead of the number 2, or is it like typical for number 1 to be like so far ahead that there's no conversation?
No, I think they're usually pretty close. It definitely varies from project to project. I think we'll get a lot of interest on this project from a lot of really good firms, so I do think that we'll have pretty close kind of proposals and rankings. Yeah, I don't think super common is one that's like way far ahead, but
I could just add to that a little bit. We'll talk about the makeup of the designer selection panel, because the group that has the ultimate say is unfortunately not this group here at the table. There is a designer selection panel that is mostly made up of MSBA and state designated committee members. We will have 3 people at that seat, and then the ranking happens with all of that group. So I've seen things where there is the first 3 ranked highest, usually the last to do the interview, the second DSP meetings. And then the 4th is like a far drop off based on where the conversation's headed with the DSP panel. It really does vary, but it won't just be this group, unfortunately.
yeah, and actually, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is exactly what Jen was just talking about. It's the 13 members appointed by the executive director of the MSBA, and then 3 members from the city. And the 3 members are listed there: the mayor, the superintendent of schools, and somebody from the school committee.
We will have lots of meetings with everyone to make sure, like Matt saying, that we all know we're reviewing and what's important, and things that that this group finds important that should be brought forth to the larger DSP committee, so that they hear some of the local thoughts and concerns and from the review.
Will you be part of that DSP process, like in the room?
We'll be in the room, but we won't say anything unless
We're not allowed to speak. It's a Zoom meeting, so.
Yeah.
Probably up.
So we'll have to chat outside.
It's being recorded, I can't see.
Okay, we won't have.
No.
But before the 3 members from this committee go to the DSP, you'll have a really good idea of you're kind of leaning towards, or at least your top 3. As you start to look and kind of get familiar with how the proposals are laid out, they're all going to be fairly similar in terms of how they're laid out. So you'll be able to really compare each of the proposals to each other and say, okay, this one definitely speaks way more about CTE. Like, this architect has never done, CTE programs, that type of stuff. Like, you'll start to really, shift towards one or 2 architects just by looking at and kind of, making your own decisions. So,
Emily?
So that I understand this. The MSBA chooses 13 people from wherever, like from a different, what?
They choose.
Okay, so they choose 10 people, but they're not from here?
No.
They're just from wherever.
It's like an established panel.
Yeah.
It's
They are at least, so they are a standing committee.
Okay.
So it's
Well, they already
experts.
have them?
They do.
They have the 10 people.
And they have 13 and we get 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just make sure, yes.
Yeah.
There's that pointed, yes. There's just so many of them. But they have 13 that are appointed. There are architects, engineers, people in the building industry, MSBA folks.
What
and
makes them not choose people that they're from? This is so frustrating. What makes them not choose people? Okay.
I don't know, whatever, I can't fight this right now.
This is the way the game.
I know,
This is
yeah,
the way
I
it's
know.
played, but
It's frustrating.
I think the point, their goal from an MSBA perspective is that there are people in industry like weighing in on, like, practically speaking, what needs to happen in these design studies, because they have a really prescriptive way that they want these design studies completed, right? So,
And
Yeah.
and the other thing that I heard, I think it might have been one of you all, from left field, is that, look, they're paying for half of this building.
Right.
So they should probably have a say. Everyone's not buying it. So, you know, I mean, the mayor, the superintendent of schools, and whoever we appoint to the school committee, in all likelihood, 0 of them will know anything about building a high school.
No, totally, but they'll know everything about Medford and like what our school district needs, so.
But I assume that the other 13 members will all have, literally, this is their career.
Yeah.
So, if I was the person writing half the check for this, I would not want it to be just elected people and one
No,
person
yeah,
who's
that's true,
got a
yeah.
doctorate in education deciding anything about the core of who's capable of actually designing this building. Cause honestly, like, I wouldn't know, I mean, I would look at their website, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're all great, they've done another building.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um, So.
Alright.
that's my take on that.
Certainly, we
I do
can't
wish
change
it had-
it, so.
Yeah.
Let's pick our.
Yeah.
Let me,
Just to make sure I understand everything you said, so we will all get to look at their proposals.
Yes.
Ourselves. So while we only have 3 seats, we get to talk about the concerns of Medford. They're just gonna make sure that they are qualified to do the job and they haven't gotten like all the high school projects in the last year and have a, monopoly on these projects. But we all get to look at them and give our thoughts in this forum.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, we'll have some pretty detailed meetings going through the proposals, we'll all talk about it, we can create. Evaluation spreadsheets where, everybody goes through and kind of gives rankings of, which one, right? Third section for the proposal, so that, yeah, we can have a good conversation with this committee, and then, that informs the opinion of the 3 members, so.
And I will say, the reason they have the mayor, the superintendent, school committee member on as the 3 members, they really do listen, to the community, and the concerns of those 3 members. And I think that, making sure that the concerns, the thoughts, are really prepared in advance and unified, going in to make sure that they really hear what the desires of your community are. That really.
Yeah, the 3 members do hold a lot of weight in the meeting, so it will be important to, make sure you're going in with stuff to say, really vouching for, certain parts of a proposal that you like, because the MSBA does, the DSB does listen to the 3 members, because you are the experts of the town, so, they are, like Libby said, taking a look at, how much work do each of the architectural firms have, and stuff like that, so.
I'm assuming there'll be witness coaching going on ahead of time for the 3 folks we send over, right? Like that you all will be really working them up so they know.
we're not gonna talk about that.
No. Well, I just like, I'm assuming each of these 3 people will have never been to this kind of a thing before.
We can attend somebody else's DSB.
No, we should do that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I just have to register.
The main goal for them is that they want to keep it fair, right? They say you can have your opinions, but they ask that the 3 members don't come into the DSP meeting with a rank. That's their key. So you can have 3 design firms that you think 3 or 4 or 5 that have risen to the top. But you're not supposed to go into the DSP meeting saying, I want architectural firm B as number 1, and then architectural number 2, that we're not supposed to coach.
I said several things tonight, I'm not to say.
We're all learning.
My report of
Any questions about the DSP?
Actually, can you go to the next slide? And I think we kind of already, kind of touched on this, but it's based on qualifications. And these are all of the kind of categories that we'll be looking at, that the architects need to, submit their proposal, kind of answering it and highlighting their experience and their financial stability. They need to prove that, they can financially do a project of this size. But yeah, so it's a pretty set process on kind of what each of the proposals would look like. So all proposals will essentially look, like I said, the same in covering kind of these criteria. So and I think there's one more, but I think it's just, yeah, so this is what Jenny's going to send over with some of the meeting dates. The highlights in blue are for the designer selection process. So those are kind of the 4 key dates that we're looking at right now. The issuing of the RFS on July 30th. A month later, proposals will be due. We'll have a couple weeks to review and get them to the MSBA before we get to our first DSP meeting on September 23rd. And then on the far right side, the highlight in red is our first MSBA submission, the PDP submission. That's kind of the first critical milestone once we get the designer on board.
So I have a question. I see MSBA first appear in late January, but based on my understanding of what's discussed, or what has been discussed, did they make an appearance, in the timeline much sooner, right?
Yeah,
sometime in September.
The DSP meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you just flag for me where MSBA would start appearing? Would it be the 23rd? Every time I see DSP, is that also mean MSBA?
Yeah, designer selection panel is MSBA.
Okay, thank you.
Put an MSBA next to that, just so it's clear. But yeah, those are the 2 designer selection panel MSBA meetings.
Okay.
And then after that, we won't talk to them a whole lot until we submit the first PDP submission.
Right?
Quick question. Do you guys have like a modified timeline there? When you might do the front with the site walkthrough with everybody?
Oh, in the RFS, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
We haven't recast that yet.
Yeah.
It's like on the to-do list. We can send it to you as soon as we're done.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to join us.
Yeah, that's always.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have plenty of time to do a walkthrough.
I figured it's obviously it's pushed out.
Yes.
Other questions?
Of those dates that this committee meets, Judy, are there on those dates, are there dates that we have to make significant votes that you want to make sure we have for?
Yes, we can flag those. So far, we haven't had a quorum problem, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. So. I get that.
Without any of that.
Any other questions? There a motion to adjourn?
The only question that I did have, and it's probably a little early, but just hearing kind of concerns tonight just about making sure the public is informed. Does it make sense to try to schedule a community forum of sorts where we're introduced and we start to explain the process? Because I've always found that that's always people won't pay attention, and then when they start to ask questions, it's like, well, we've been doing this for 6 months, and this is how it goes. And I think just trying to drill process into kind of everybody's mind helps along the way, so that when we do get to a vote, people are aware this has been ongoing for quite a while. So I'm always
That's a great question. I think one thought that I have is that that's like a September thing. because I think we will lack engagement in the summer, but I would be curious what you all think about that time. Whether you think there would be significant engagement in summer for a community meeting.
I would agree with September.
Yeah.
And when they give
Yeah.
the, Leadville time to do their work in terms of site, why would you site? Because that would be one of the first questions that I would think the community would say, well, why aren't you choosing X, Y, and Z? So,
Yeah, that's a great point.
To build on that too, it might be a good time for us to start talking about project website. Maybe have that now, present if there's an interest in the school side and the student side. That could be something that we in parallel work on during the summer, which I can help take the lead on to get that going in the background. So maybe sort of do if everybody agrees that September sounds like a good time just based on history of other projects. It's the summertime, it's just difficult at best, and we won't have much information. I feel like people might sort of lose interest if we don't have enough quality information to give them. But if we sort of do a soft rollout of the project, by that time, in the process of getting the designer on board, done site selections, have the website ready to go live, kind of make it a little bit more of an event, if you will, to the public. Sure. Member Zell?
Thank you. So I like that a lot because also, at least school committee members, I don't know if everybody here will get those requests, but we're gonna get asked these questions long before September, just in an email here and there, and hold that till September is not a really satisfying response. The other thing though, this is something around the website. As during this whole process, I have reviewed school building project websites. There seems to be a consistent thing that's missing. And that is that the websites seem to always represent now. And when we're looking at how did this all play out, there's like understanding the entire process, start to beginning from a school building website seems to be absolutely out of date. So I don't even know what that would look like. Like you can find the timeline, but like the timeline we just saw is what you can find. And I'm just thinking, is there a way we can like sort of pay it forward a little for other building committees in the future? We're gonna be like, well, how do they do that? How do they do that? And they're always asking those questions about the early phases, and we're gonna all forget very much about this phase when we have shovels in the ground. We're gonna be like, oh, that was so long ago, who cares? So that's just something to think about when we're doing the website, is like, it isn't just for the community now, in my mind, it should be to like help other school committees and school building committees in the future be able to like, they're gonna come in for the most part, probably ignorant of the whole process, all 9 yards. And I mean, I've seen some really nice websites, but I cannot get that because they're all at the end. And nobody looking at them from the outside is ever at the end. They're always at the end.
So we get some examples of
project websites, because that is, as sort of a select team, sort of come up with sort of a standard that for all of our projects. And one piece of that is the schedule, which talks about different modules that you have, and sort of expand on that very much. I think that the difficulty that we have with sort of forecasting too much is that there's a time and place to give out information to the public. You don't want to rush it and have people jump to conclusions too much, because the minute we say one thing, they're gonna lean on that. They're gonna hold on to that for dear life for the next 7 years, and I'm stuck with it. So I think one of the ways that we've sort of solved that issue a little bit with our websites is we call them fact-based. They're not flashy, but they're fact-based. So that way we can certainly explain the facts. So here's the process. We just don't want to go into any specific details about this project. Until it's ready to be prime time, right? Because there's a time and a place, and what we found when it comes to getting projects through the process and through ultimate votes and getting the towns and districts to agree on something is by giving them the facts in the order of which they are actual facts and actually given, because if we start jumping the gun and say something that's later on going to change, that seems to be the kiss of death for every project. If you say it's going to cost 150 million one day, and then 3 weeks later, oh, actually it's 145, doesn't matter if it goes up or down.
Really?
It's different. That's the one key thing that we kind of have to, we want to make sure that we sort of go through the process so that it's always based on the educational needs of the school, making sure that we're getting the most out of the MSBA's reimbursement process and all those parts and pieces that we're going to guide you through, making sure it's the right size, it's the right building, everything is right sized. Then we start getting into the tougher conversations about what is it going to cost, how will that go? And all those parts and pieces that come through, all of this is all going to come in different pieces and at different phases, but we definitely want to make sure that the information goes out to the public. But we also want to make sure that sort of spoon feed it when we have the facts, we know for sure we have backup for everything.
So Linda, maybe you and Will can connect, because Will has been maintaining our site so far. And then perhaps can work with Will for like another iteration of the site. Maybe we can look at that at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then we can sort of tell you what we think and what we think will resonate and add to it at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that work, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. I know, speaking with Lisa, she'd also wanted to be involved in that process as well, so.
Yeah.
We're happy to bump our heads together and work on that.
Great.
Before we adjourn, Jenny, just, can we think about, when we talk about the September community meeting, that parents, September and May are really our crunch time, and so if we can delay as much into September and get our feet into the school system. I think about the parents, that constituency, there's gonna be the community of people,
Yeah.
how much is it gonna cost? And then there's gonna be the community of the concerned parents, is where is my child gonna go?
Yeah.
So I just, as you know, as a school,
Yeah.
as a parent.
Yeah. September.
So, having a
We can-
meeting the first
We can
week
look
of,
at the district calendar and figure out like where is there some space.
thank you.
Luke?
So just following that conversation, I just want to express sort of my support for a fact-based website that serves as a guardrail to what would otherwise become a hype machine. A new high school, very large facility that plays such a big role in the community. The gossip around it, the excitement, the imagination, visionary, that's going to take on a life of its own, whether we like it or not. And so, having a website that's fact-based, that's like a useful resource for people like myself who do a lot of research and want to see basic documents, it will be valuable because that'll act as a guardrail on what would otherwise be, an explosive hype machine.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to adjourn? Someone. By Emily, seconded by?
Second.
Nicole? I will call the roll. Jenny Graham, yes. Mayor Longo Kern,
Yes.
Dr. Galusi.
Yes.
Dr. Cushing,
Yes.
Marta Cabral. Yeah. Libby Brown.
Yeah.
Marissa Desmond,
Yes.
Maria Dorsey,
Yes.
Brian Hilliard,
Yes.
Tracy Keane.
Yes.
Emily Lazaro. Yes. Paul Morrell.
Yes.
Aaron Olapati.
Yes.
Bryce Preisner. And Joan Bowen. Yes. 15 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Meeting is adjourned.